Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to this year's AGM from CPCW LPC. Here with your committee and employees of the LPC, and hello to anyone watching on YouTube. Just to say thank you for joining us and welcome to the AGM. The first point is approval of the minutes of the AGM held from last year on the 23rd of September 2020, which was during COVID, so was a Zoom affair. The minutes have been circulated. Can we approve those minutes as correct for those that were in attendance? Yeah?
I propose it, and I'm sure someone else will second it, and then that's it done.
Okay. I'll just sign those. Okay, thank you very much. So, point 3 on the agenda is the chairman's report. So, I have written a report that is available online, but just a brief overview. Obviously, this year has been one of the most challenging, if not the most challenging in the history of community pharmacy, depending on how you look at it. But I suppose the key point I wanted to make across from my report was just a huge thank you to the LPC for being so versatile and agile in what's been a very demanding circumstance to support those contractors that have needed help and support throughout what's been a completely unusual time, alongside COVID, with things like the right reports and everything just becoming a virtual world and having to adapt our way of working. So thank you to the employees of the LPC who've been fantastic, and thank you to the members of the LPC, really supportive, and thank you to you, the contractors. Again, we completely understand what you've been going through over the past 18 months, certainly since the last AGM. It's just been a whirlwind, and there's been lots going on, things to absorb, things to implement, things to change in your business, along with other external challenges that have been really tricky to deal with. And hopefully you found the support of your LPC there if you needed us. And just a big thank you really to each and every one of you for your hard work and commitment, supporting our patients get the medication and services they needed throughout the pandemic. So the rest of my report is available online on the LPC website, and I will move on to item 4, which is financial declarations.
We have published the accounts, and I'm pleased to say that the LPC is in sound financial health, and as such I propose the report to the meeting.
Okay.
And you need to approve them.
We need to approve them. So somebody wants to...
Okay. So in terms of postal voting, I've received a total of 138 votes back, all of which to accept the LPC accounts. I'm going to open to the floor for anybody that's not working for a CCA company or a CCA company that hasn't replied. So the ones I've had are from Roland's, Well, Lloyd's and Boots. So I'm happy to take any votes.
Any extra votes?
Yeah.
Well,
So
if
anybody wants to accept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that for 2 contracts to do?
Yes.
Okay.
3.
Yeah.
Okay. And is there any to reject? Okay, thanks very much. So the financial declarations have been approved.
Thank you all very much for your confidence in the work that we've carried out.
And thank you, Dr. Cubbin, for being the grand old treasurer of everyone. Agenda point 5 is employee reports. So again, the employee report has been circulated online, but I don't know if someone, one of the employees, just wants to give a brief word from us.
Yeah, I'll take that if that's okay. So I think the report's been pre-circulated, and just to echo some of the words from Dane, you know, the report looks at the time period from April 2020 through till March 2021. I do mention it at the top of the report, but it does need to be saying just thank you. The response of all community pharmacy contractors to COVID was absolutely breathtaking. You know, we've seen the tenacity, the professionalism and the resilience of community pharmacy and their teams shine through right throughout this period. Our contractors stayed available to help patients in the most trying times, and you really need to be immensely proud of this. All of that in the context of increased pressures, the obligations and higher cost of operations, with the overall system taking time to adequately make allowances to support you, and other parts of the system went significantly virtual, so we were left there to fend as the front door of the NHS, and we did a sterling job. So just all of the pharmacies, you're an absolute credit to the profession, and thank you. I'm not going to go through the detail of my report. That's available online if you wanted to have a look through it. There were significant changes and significant adaptations and challenges as we went through the period. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Any questions regarding the AGM? Okay, so in terms of the AGM part of the meeting, I'd like to thank everyone for attending the AGM this year. And I'm going to bring it to a close. Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much. The next point on the agenda is the special general meeting that's been called. So I am just going to read off the agenda here in terms of the special general meeting, just to give people an overview as to why this was called. So this special meeting of contractors is being called to amend the LPC constitution to allow the committee to delay the elections for LPC membership by 1 year. Currently, members' term of office expire on the 31st of March 2022. However, proposals for change about the future model of local and national contractor representation and support are likely to be put to a contractor vote within the next year. For this reason, the committee considers that the election should be delayed until later in the year when a new model of support has been determined by the sector. To achieve this, we propose to amend the Constitution of Community Pharmacy Cheshire and Wirral LPC, CPCW, as follows. So, Proposal 1, to delay the LPC elections by 12 months to 2023. The existing clause 13, term of office, subject to paragraphs 14 and 16, members of the committee shall hold office from the 1st of April in the year of the election or appointment for a period of 4 years. The new clause that we are proposing, term of office, subject to paragraphs 14 and 16, members of the committee shall hold office from the 1st of April in the year of the election or appointment for a period of 4 years, except that the term of office starting on the 1st of April 2022 shall be postponed until the 1st of April 2023, and current LPC members shall hold office for a period of 5 years. So I'm just going to pass to Alison in regards to the voting.
So similarly, the same number of postal votes came in from the CCA companies mentioned earlier. So that's 138 votes to accept that proposal and 0 to reject. Do you have the same votes or you'll be voting within the room?
Same again.
Same again. Okay, thank you very much. So that's accepted.
Thank you very much. And just to move on to Proposal 2, to add the following definition to the LPC Constitution. Meeting means a gathering of people for the purpose of making decisions or discussing committee objectives and operations. Meetings may take place face-to-face, virtually, or a hybrid of both. Again, votes.
Similarly, 138 postal votes to accept received, 88 in the room.
Good. Thank you very much. So we'll move forward with those proposals and make the changes. Any questions regarding the special general meeting? Okay. I'll bring the special general meeting to a close. So thank you very much. Now we have a couple of updates off the back of the AGM and the SGM. So I'm just going to pass you over to Stephen Thomas, who's going to give you an update on the review steering group.
Thanks, Dane. Clearly, we've just voted on a change to the Constitution, which was brought around by a suggestion from the review steering group. For anybody that's watching the YouTube presentation that doesn't know what the review steering group is, it's a group that was formed to take forward the recommendations out of the right review, looking at the representational structures for community pharmacy. So The group is tasked with coming together with a proposal which will be put to contractors for vote probably in the new year now, and then taking that forward. So this deck is quite a lengthy deck with quite a lot of information in it. Adam, I'm happy for this to go onto the website once finished. I don't intend in the short period of time I've got to talk through the slides to go through it in any detail, but to sort of give you a key flavour of some of the things that we're up to over the next sort of 6 months or so max. So now the next slide. So we're going to look at progress we've made to date and what we are currently working on. There is an opportunity for questions at the end if anybody has any. Have the next slide, please, Adam. Thanks. So just if you want to click through it, that would be great. So in terms of the timeline, we've been doing a number of different things over the course of the sort of spring and summer, but we're now in a period where we're working with contractors, LPCs, PSNC and the trade bodies and other stakeholders, particularly within the NHS as well, to try and develop potential options for things going forward. And we're also trying to, reaching a conclusion at the moment about how contractors are going to vote on the proposal that's put forward. And we'll see some more details about that in the coming weeks. We've also just recruited a project manager. Up to now, we've been working with a consultancy company, but we've now recruited a project manager to take the work forward. They started at the beginning of this month, so there's a slide a little bit later on that. There will be a request to LPCs coming out with the second yearly PSNC request for funding. For CPCW, that amounts to about £2,800 because it's based on volume and contractor numbers. What we're aiming for is a contractor vote in this sort of January time as we approach. So next slide, please. So as I've said, we have a small central team delivering the work. Some of the central team are PSNC employees, but we've also been recruiting some other people. So if I have the next slide, please, Adam. So as I say, we've appointed some new people. So Deep Seng Gupta has been appointed as program manager. He's got a background in change, big change projects, and also where there's multiple stakeholders. So that will be really useful. His experience will be really useful to us. We've got a data administrator called Chris Healy. His responsibility is to ensure that various databases and information we hold about contractors and LPCs is up to date, and he's working with PSNC on that as well. We've got a new communications consultant. Up until now, we've had somebody called Mel Woodnick working with us. She's moved on to a new role, and so Sarah Shaw has joined us to pick up the communications baton. And just to say that the programme sponsor at PSNC, who is sort of driving a lot of this and making sure that we keep on track, is James Wood. The next slide has got, can't read it from here, has got quite a bit of information on the different roles and responsibilities of the programme team. If anybody's interested, I would suggest that when these are up on the website, go and have a look at their different roles. I think it's quite an interesting thing to have a look at what people are involved in. So we've been having a continued focus on communications, trying to get the message out to contractors and to LPCs and to PSNC about the work that we're doing. So we're adopting a number of different ways of working. So on the RSG website, there is a vlog with James talking about some of the things that we've been up to. There's an August update on the RSG website, and it's also been sent to contractors via the and LPCs via the RSG newsletter, which you can sign up for on the PSNC website and on the RSG website. We've done a one-page summary on the work that we've done to date, and we also launched a survey of potential roles on national and local organisations, and that fell out of the back of some of the engagement events that we ran tail end of July, beginning of August. James has also done a podcast, again, giving updates to people. So what we're trying to do is get as many different ways of trying to engage people as possible, and making sure that the website's up to date with all of the latest stuff that we've been working on. So I've said that we're trying to engage as many people as possible. We have got some quite interesting statistics on how many people we are actually getting into touch with. So our fortnightly emails are being opened by over 5,000 people on a regular basis. We're getting 6,000 click-throughs to the vlog that James did, and we've had over 11,500 views of the RSG website since the start of the year. And considering that's from a standing start, we're pretty happy with those numbers. That's not to say that we wouldn't like to see them higher. Clearly what we want to do is reach all of the contractors and as many other people as possible to make sure that everybody has had the opportunity for a say in the work that the RSG is doing. We also have set up some focus groups, and those are held on a variety of dates and times. And we have, over the period of running the last series, had 500 places available. And as I said, we also did an online survey, which also brought extra information into the work programme. So, focus groups, in July to August, we held a number of different meetings. So we held meetings with the trade bodies, we had 10 focus groups. We also had focus events for wider stakeholders and trade press. So some of the wider stakeholders have been the buying groups, so that when they're having communications with their members, they can also be pointing people to the RSG work. What we're trying to do is seek feedback on the first step of defining what it is that we want the national and local bodies to do as a sort of totality, and then try and split that up so that we know what each part of the representative structure should be doing. So to that end, we asked contractors, LPCs and PSNC to think about the services that should be delivered at a national level, those at a local level, and which services could be delivered centrally. So some of those might be local services that could be delivered centrally, which at the moment are all delivered locally. So, and some of those might be things like HR services could all be centralised, but it might be service spec development or something along those lines. So those are the sorts of things that we were thinking about. So what could be different in the future? What we think from a national point of view at the moment is that the feedback that we're getting, the national body should be setting direction for community pharmacy. We should be working to improve negotiation outcomes. I think everybody's probably likely to have an opinion on that. We also think that we need to strengthen the voice of community pharmacy, and there's certainly a role for the national organisation in that, and to provide better support to local organisations. And underpinning all of that is for both local and national organisations to have an improved and clear governance structure to make sure that all parts of the system are working to the same governance. So on a high level, the national organisation should be looking to negotiate pharmacy contracts as it is now, implement and manage the national parts of the contract, centralise guidance and support and represent community pharmacy nationally, whereas locally we're thinking that negotiating local contracts and services with local healthcare systems, so things like ICSs will fall into that, represent community pharmacy voice locally, develop and manage local relations, and provide local guidance and support for community pharmacy. You might think there's not an awful lot different in that, and you may well be right, but the way will be changes to the way things are done as a responsibility that falls out of it. We do recognise that there are other representative bodies, so people like the MPA, CCAA, RPS, and no one system of representation for contractors can work in isolation without those bodies also having some involvement. Okay. So potential roles of local organisations. So there's a lot of detail on this particular slide, but fundamentally it comes down to what's in the centre of the slide: promoting understanding and mutual benefits between community pharmacy and local healthcare structures. So it's all about that representation at a local level, making sure that people locally understand what community pharmacy can do, what we can deliver, and what it's going to cost them for us to do that. And it's principally where it comes down to. And there's obviously a whole heap of communications and engagement that sits underneath all of that. Essential roles of the national organisation, again, possibly not an awful lot that's of a surprise here, but vision and leadership, negotiate national contract, implement it, provide guidance about it, and represent at a national level, and then communications and performance management and reporting. But there are some things that could be provided centrally, as I mentioned earlier on. So one of those is HR, Treasury, finance and budgeting support. So is there an opportunity to try and centralise some of that? That might be an interesting thing to explore. A central communications team, so the LPCs locally could seek advice and guidance from a central team when they get queries at a local level. So the core training that needs to be undertaken, particularly around governance, and some service development and evaluations, and possibly even a national provider company. So we're interested in people's comments on all of those, both contractor and LPC representatives. And I think that, you know, going forward, that's one of the areas that we are starting to look at, what could be delivered centrally and what will be delivered more locally. In terms of outputs from the focus group, our clear takeaways are support for a stronger negotiation, feedback on the importance of building a vision, a request for the RSG to articulate how community pharmacy will work and engage with the ICS, changing NHS structure, and that's a piece of work that's active at the moment, and to debate the role of LPCs and services provided to local contractors, and particularly in the area of consistency and clarity. And there's quite a number of questions about the case for change. So what will be tangibly different? So it's interesting, isn't it, that we've just gone through a couple of slides where actually we could argue that a lot of the stuff has stayed the same, but actually I think it's about the relationships between how national and local work together that will be the different piece. So we need to really start to give some serious thought to that. On the 19th of August, we held a face-to-face workshop. It was the first face-to-face meeting that most of us have been to, and it was a really valuable exercise, and we got quite a lot of things fairly well bottomed out and are seeking to replicate this in September as well. So we did quite a substantial amount of work on the contractor voting process, about how community pharmacy can interact with ICS and NHS landscape, and we started to look at structures and future governance. And so we've had a Zoom meeting since then and are looking to do a further face-to-face meeting next week. We are committed to, as we get to a point where we can share information with contractors, LPCs and PSNC, to making that information available. So one of the areas that we're discussing at the moment is the voting process. So there's a number of different things about the voting process that are particularly tricky, but some of the stuff that's quite clear to us is that we need a clear decision from contractors on the path for the future. We need a strong mandate from contractors, and we need to address a lack of trust around the process, reassure stakeholders and ease divisions within the sector. And some of the practical considerations are that we recognise that people are wanting to understand how many times they will have the opportunity to vote, and the vote will be a single vote, a yes or no binary, accept, don't accept. The timing is going to be more than likely in January. The format of the vote is actually the bit that we are continuing to discuss, and we are looking at voter turnout and weighting of votes as part of that process. In terms of local options and NHS and alignment, you'll see from the map on the right-hand side of the slide that we've done a piece of work that seeks to map ICS with LPCs, and also a little bit of some extra detail on there as well about which region they are, NHS region each ICS is in, purely because until you've got that level of detail, it's very difficult to work out what the local structure is likely to be. And we then have to consider the balance of national and local commissioning, the approach to boundaries by NHS and local government. What happens if they suddenly decide in 5 years' time to review? There's no point us going through all this process again. We need to make sure that whatever we come up with is agile. that can accommodate any future changes. So understanding what's yet to still be determined is actually quite a key thing. So some of the ICSs are not necessarily at the level of maturity that you would want, and there's still some discussion about some of the ICS merging with other ICS. So it can become quite challenging when we're starting to look at this, which is one of the reasons why it obviously needs to be quite an agile process. So, coming to the end of this, you'll be pleased to know. Looking forward, September to October, we're going to be looking at the roles of national and local organisations based on the feedback that we've had. We're going to be seeking more stakeholder engagement and input. We're going to work through the implications of merging NHS structures, designing options for the future governance, and coming up with a straw man really for potential future models. And we're going to really require people to be involved in that process, to make sure that nothing comes as a surprise to anybody, but equally to ensure that people feel that they've had their say. So our ask from stakeholder groups, which obviously includes all contractors as well as LPCs and PSNC, is please get involved. There's plenty of information on the RSG website. There's also an opportunity to sign up to the focus group. That isn't a closed group. If you want to be involved with it, please feel free to do so. We would really ask that when we publish information about our current thinking, that people engage with it and provide feedback on it, because we want to get to a situation where the proposal that we put forward to contractors, nothing comes as a surprise to anybody. So we really feel that we need to get to that particular position. So the more people that get involved, the earlier, the better it will be when we get to the voting process. The next slide, we'll just click through, is actually a bit of a confusogram, which again, if you want to carry on clicking, shows a number of different activities that we're going to be getting involved in over the next few weeks and months, and it shows some of the high-level activities and where engagement will occur. That is a very rapid run through of some quite detailed slides. I'm happy to take any questions that anybody has. But other than that, as I say, I'm happy for these slides to go on the website for the time being, and more information is available on the RSG website should you require it.
Stephen, I wonder if you have any idea as to when the vote might take place.
So we're still looking at January. So there had been one of the initial proposals that it took place in December. Feedback from contractors was that that wasn't a good idea. So we shifted the timescale to look at January, and there's an awful lot to do between now and then. But we are ramping up some of the activity that the RSG is doing so that we can try and stick to that timetable. But exact dates, as yet.
And you can't say how those votes will be cast.
Not yet. But watch this space for in a couple of weeks' time.
Very good. Thank you.
Any further questions for Stephen? Okay. Thank you very much, Stephen. I will, all the slides, as Stephen said, will be available online. So please feel free to review them and look into the detail. We will be moving on to the next update from our CEO, Adam, regarding the Community Pharmacy Contractual Framework progress. Over to you, Adam.
Brilliant, thank you, Dane. What I'm going to do, this is a whistle-stop tour of what's happened with the Year 3 Community Pharmacy Contractual Framework Agreement. So I am going to run through it very quickly. Some of the slides from the PSNC webinars that are upcoming, I've skipped over, so certainly it doesn't replace that. This is just to give you a very brief idea. Please watch those as they come out in due course. So really, the headlines from the negotiation, the funding's flat, as we knew it would be with a 5-year deal. However, there's been some really good achievements in terms of transitional payments and some service incentives. Within this year, we've got 2 new advanced services in the hypertension case finding service and the smoking cessation service. We've also had an expansion of the new medicines service and the new pharmacy quality scheme. Some of the operational elements include a revised pharmacy access scheme, which will affect many of our contractors, and also progression of changes to regulation that support the efficiencies that were within the contractual framework negotiated. In terms of a negotiation, PSNC do report that negotiations were intense. However, there were key concessions won, and the final deal was accepted by an overwhelming majority of the committee. There was some delay in the announcement, so from agreement through to announcement, there was a bit of a gap, and that was just caused by the internal processes of government announcements. I think that's been particularly impacted by the pandemic and what else needs to go through during this time. The key benefits of the deal: transitional payments have been extended. There's been significant progress on service developments, and actually some of the incentive funding for the hypertension case finding service have come from outside of the contractual framework settlement monies. There has also been agreement to explore more regulatory changes, and crucially, there's been a securing of a review of years 1 and 2 in light of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The key concessions won. The scope of a pharmacy quality scheme has been reduced. It's about half as onerous as it used to be. Certainly that's a positive in terms of cost control and also more achievable for contractors. There's been realistic targets within the PQS and the new services, and also some of the more unworkable proposals that came forward from the department, they were pushed back on and didn't make it through. There's also positivity around the FAS eligibility criteria, as the old FAS scheme was a fixed criteria and didn't move no matter what happened in your locality. There's also a really good element about the COVID-related costs, and although the business services is still working through that, the total claimed is believed to be much higher than the 120 million originally offered, and there's some pushing for the timing of those payments to be made positively. In terms of advance payments, there's been a change of timings in advance payments, or there's going to be a change of timings, which will benefit all contractors. So we've got an extended transition payment for contractors who've been using the pharmacy early payment scheme. And then from November, all advance payments will be made about 20 days earlier than the current payment timetable. And I'm sure that will be welcomed in terms of managing cash flow for our contractors. One thing to note is that to achieve those advance payments, you have to use the NHS Business Service Authority's Manage Your Service, or MYS portal, for your monthly submissions. So if you're not already doing that, I'd really encourage you to look into putting that in place rapidly. From a service development point of view, there's a few things I want to cover very quickly. The pharmacy quality scheme focuses on priorities supporting NHS recovery from the pandemic. The new medicine service is expanded, and I'll talk you through a little bit about what that means. I'll talk you through the 2 new services, the hypertension case finding and the smoking cessation services, or as much as we know about them at the time of filming. And also there's an ongoing extension of the CPCS referrals and a new pharmacy quality scheme for the year. So this year's pharmacy quality scheme, it began on the 1st of September, so it's already underway. It's for a total of £75 million of funding, and there's an aspiration payment which will be able to be claimed later this year. There's just a single declaration period, which is going to happen in February of next year. And really it's a focus on priorities supporting recovery from COVID-19. If you do need more information, we signpost to the PSNC website, which is the web address you can see on the slide there. Please keep your eye on that for the latest guidance. All of the timetable stuff we will be putting in our monthly tracker, and you will get all of that information through the LPC newsletter as well. In terms of the expansion to the new medicine service, so this again started on the 1st of September. It's got into many more therapeutic areas. I think there's 18 in total now. And it also covers the abilities for carers and either parents or guardians to receive an NMS where it's appropriate or where the individual is unable to consent themselves. There is also a catch-up to do with the COVID pandemic. So anyone who would have been eligible for an NMS during the pandemic, including all of the new therapeutic areas, is able to have a catch-up NMS, which should allow patients to receive a benefit and pharmacy contractors to be able to drive that service and make sure they look after their patients well. The service specification is updated. It's on the PSNC website. It is in draft format, but we're not expecting any material changes as it goes through to final. In terms of the hypertension case finding, so we know a few things about this, although we still haven't had the full service spec. This starts in the 1st of October 2021. It's going to be a 2-part service. The first is about a clinic check of measuring someone's blood pressure to find cases, and where that's then clinically indicated to offer those patients an ambulatory blood pressure monitoring. This will require some setup and some investment by a contractor, and there are some fees involved, which you can see on the screen today. There's also some incentive payments that should help in actually the initial investment in the ambulatory blood pressure monitoring machines. Those are all on the screen. One thing I do really want to pull out for both these 2 new advanced services is initially at least a provision must be made by a pharmacist. This may well change as the service goes through, but certainly to start with, this isn't like some of the, particularly the Cheshire and Mersey blood pressure services, where it can be by wider team members. This has to be a pharmacist to start with. For the smoking cessation service, so this is due to start in January of next year, and it's a little bit similar to the discharge medicine service in that where a patient is started off with a smoking cessation journey in hospital, when they leave hospital and when they're discharged, the trusts can pass that patient on to pharmacy via referral. If you wanted to take part in this service, there's some setup fees and the consultation fees you can see on the screen. And again, it's probably most relevant to those contractors who are already providing a locally commissioned service, as some of our areas are doing that. The full and detailed service spec, like the hypertension one, isn't out yet, but we are expecting that imminently. The other changes to go through. So FAS has changed with updated eligibility criteria, and the payments are now based on dispensing volume. There's been some pandemic provisions, or a pandemic provision added to the NHS regulations, just as learning from what's happened throughout COVID-19. There's been some amendments made to market entry provisions, and HEE are going to be providing an education programme, including training up existing pharmacists as independent prescribers. So the revised FAS starts in January of next year. It's got a funding cap of 20 million on, and the eligibility criteria, which you can see in the bullet points on screen, have been updated. The payments are now going to be made on a bell curve of dispensing volume, with a maximum payment of 17,500 per year. All of the eligible pharmacies will be receiving letters from NHS E&I, and those reviews are going to take place through the early part of next year as well. In terms of what's ongoing in discussions with PSNC and government, the Department of Health and Social Care is seeking a VAT exemption for services delivered under pharmacist supervision. Whether that gets offered or not may well determine what happens with those advanced services I spoke about. They're also looking at a number of things around methodology for pricing services, as well as some regulatory helps, which will be about creating the efficiencies within the contract. So when PSNC have reflected on the negotiation, there's been some key wins. The lack of funding uplift is really frustrating, and it really does reflect the disconnect on how we see ourselves and how vital we see ourselves to the communities and how they see us versus how Her Majesty's government sees us. There was also a little bit of disappointment that NHS E&I declined to provide further PCN funding, despite the local systems absolutely needing community pharmacy input. Our input within PCNs for our leads is very narrowly defined within the pharmacy quality scheme. So there was an opportunity to broaden that, which wasn't taken by central government, unfortunately. Next steps from PSNC, they're progressing on the annual review process. So that's about demonstrating value and costs of what's happened in years 1 and 2. They're also looking around supporting the implementation and looking ahead to the year 4 negotiations, as well as the future negotiations and positioning the sector thereon. Just a couple slides left around contractor support. So there are, as I mentioned in the earlier slides, there are still some discussions ongoing, and all of the remaining details will be announced and published as soon as they can. The vast majority of PSNC briefings and resources are now published on the pharmacy quality scheme, on new medicines service, as well as funding and some of the frequently asked questions around that. However, there will be future briefings and webinars to follow. There's an upcoming webinar which is imminent to be announced around the early payment scheme and the advance payments. There was a webinar last night on the pharmacy quality scheme. That will be available on demand very shortly, probably by the time we've uploaded this video. Hopefully it'll be available. And also the new advanced services, as the service specs come out, there will be some more webinars available to it. Our LPC, we will be looking, and we're discussing this afternoon, on what support we can offer our contractors. So please just watch this space and make sure you're subscribed to the relevant newsletters to keep yourself appraised. That's about it from me, Dane. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Adam. So that brings our AGM, EGM, and every other GM to a close. So thank you very much to those in attendance. Thank you to those watching on YouTube. I hope you found it really useful and interesting. And I will bring this one to a close.